Yeah, thank you, Dr. Reshu. It's a wonderful to have you with us. And today we are going to discuss a very, very pertinent and important topic, which we face day in and day out, starting from nursing staff to junior doctors, even at the level of senior doctors. At times we get baffled by this type of events that we are going to discuss in coming few slides. So at the end of this topic, we all should be able to understand acute transfusion reaction, how to identify them, and how to manage them. So main issue what we need to understand why we transfuse blood. Number one, to restore intravascular volume with whole blood or albumin, to restore the oxygen capacity of the blood by replacing red blood cells, to replace clotting factor and correction of anemia. Blood transfusion is a process of transferring blood-based products from one person into another through an intravenous line. Transfusion carries the risk of adverse reactions and transfusion-transmitted infections. Whole blood is nothing but a 350 to 450 ml blood collected from a donor into a plastic bag containing an anticoagulant. And this one unit is called whole blood. If you come down to components, there are three types of components that we can derive from a whole blood. Red blood cell concentrate, we call as packed cell or PRBC or packed red blood cells. Platelet concentrate, fresh frozen plasma, cryoprecipitate plasma, or platelet collected by apheresis. Apheresis is a method of collecting plasma or platelets directly from the donor, usually by a mechanical method. So this is the picture, whole blood. We divide into platelet-rich plasma, then RBC concentrate. Platelet-rich plasma can be divided into platelets, FFP, cryoprecipitate, and PRBC can be considered packed cell. Of course, we do collect blood, we store blood, and we give blood to some to for any needy person. But storing of whole blood carries its own risk. So if you store whole blood for a while, it causes reduction in the pH because of the anticoagulant you add along with it, and it becomes more acidic. Due to some hemolysis, it causes rise in plasma potassium concentration, that is extracellular potassium rise. Progressive reduction in red cell content of 2,3 dBg, ppg, which may reduce the release of oxygen at tissues level until 2,3 dBg is restored. Loss of all platelet function in whole blood within 48 hours. So donation, it happens. So we do not expect any platelet increase after a transfusion of any blood which has been there in the storage for more than 48 hours. Of course, reduction of lot of coagulant factors. 7 and 9 are relatively stable, but 8 there is definitely reduction of 10 to 20%. So there are a lot of transfusion nomenclature we use. Fresh blood transfusion, something that we give within 24 hours of collection. Autologous transfusion is a very interesting phenomenon where blood is collected from a patient for retransfusion at a later time into the same individual. It's like I'm going for a surgery 1 month from now, so let us collect 15 days from now. I'll collect blood from myself and keep it in store so that during surgery, if there is some mishap, my own blood can be given to me. Massive transfusion, when number of units transfused in a 24 hours period exceeds the recipient's blood, roughly more than 5 liters. Multiple transfusions, when there is repeated transfusion of blood over a long period of time. Whole blood can be stored at 4 degree for up to 35 days. The main indications are acute blood loss, shock, exchange transfusion neonate. But we need to understand that platelet and coagulation factors cause a lot of side effects in this patient. So usually we should use a filter whenever we can, if possible, in whole blood transfusion. Packed red blood cells can be stored at 2 to 6 degrees centigrade. And it is usually given in chronic severe anemia, leukemia, thalassemia, a lot of indications. Like in lately, what has come actually, whole blood has come into disrepute. We usually give components to reduce the side effects of plasma and platelets, etc. So preferably, whenever possible, let us give components rather than whole blood. When you come into platelet concentrate, platelet viability is optimal at 22 degree to 24 degrees centigrade, but storage is limited to 4 to 5 days. We can store only for 4 to 5 days. Indications of thrombocytopenia, we do transfuse platelets only when platelet count falls below 20,000. And that is due to platelet dysfunction, somebody taking antiplatelet like ecosprin, clopidogrel, and still bleeding with a normal platelet count, we might have to replace the dysfunctional platelets. Malignancies, major surgery. FFP, the another component which we are very accustomed to give in our critical care scenario, called fresh frozen plasma. And interestingly, it can be stored up to 12 months at 18 degree. Usually indicated in liver disorder, which causes a lot of increase in INR, DIC, and coagulation factor deficiency. Cryoprecipitate, another sister concern of fresh frozen plasma. It's a precipitate formed or collected when FFP is thawed at 4 degrees centigrade. It should be stored, can be stored for 1 year at 18 degree. Indications are usually hemophilia, von Willebrand factor, fibrinogen deficiency. We do a lot of pre-transfusion testing that we send for cross match, and majorly we do is ABO and RH blood grouping. There are certain other cross matching also, but we are more fixated and more fixed to ABO and RH blood grouping. Cross matching, there are two types of cross matching, major and minor. Major cross match that we do commonly are patient serum with donor cells. And minor cross match is patient cells donor serum that has brought into disrepute. So majorly we're doing major cross match of patient serum and donor cells, whether the patient serum contains antibody to donor PRBC or not. So interestingly, this is how you do cross match. And we do a lot of pre-transfusion testing to rule out any transmissible disease like HIV, hepatitis B, hepatitis C virus, syphilis, malaria. These are commonly varies from lab to lab. And we do some documentation before transfusing blood, like we check temperature, we check pulse, we check blood pressure, we check respiratory. Like somebody should, with a high grade fever, should not be given blood, because if you give blood at that time, if there is some reaction, we won't be able to pick up if there is any cross transfusion reaction, because patient is already having fever. The major common side effect of blood transfusion is spike in temperature. That is why it is better to give blood only when temperature is normal, so that you can pick up any transfusion reaction early. Transfusion reaction, there are a lot of classification. Majorly, if you divide it infectious and non-infectious, yes, transfusion reaction cause a lot of infectious elements like viral infection, bacterial infection. A lot of non-infectious things like reactions to RBC antigen, like acute hemolytic transfusion reaction, delayed hemolytic transfusion reaction, and minor allergic reaction, anaphylactic reaction, white cell related transfusion like febrile reaction, transfusion related acute lung injury. All these things are possible to do. But broadly, for sake of understanding, it is easy to divide into immune mediated and non-immune mediated. So immune mediated reactions are little dreaded, needs urgent attention. Those are acute hemolytic transfusion reaction. This is the most dreaded one. We have to be very careful about that. We'll be discussing this topic in coming few slides. Delayed hemolytic and serologic transfusion reaction is another reaction which happens a little bit late, 7 or 10 days down the line after blood transfusion. Febrile non-hemolytic transfusion reaction, this is the most commonest reaction which we'll be discussing. Allergic reaction, pretty common, we see day in and out. Anaphylactic reaction, little dreaded reaction. Graft versus host disease is a rare complication but definitely life-threatening. Transfusion related acute lung injury is a very interesting phenomenon which you must have seen your doctors discussing quite often after a blood transfusion in a ARDS patient. Post transfusion purpura. Coming to non-immune mediated, there are majorly 4 or 5 which we need to consider. One is transfusion associated cardiac overload or fluid overload, hypothermia, electrolyte toxicity, iron overload, hypotensive reaction, which we'll be discussing in coming slides. Just for the sake of understanding, I have prepared a question. A 46-year-old male with a GI bleed developed sudden temperature rise to 101 degree Fahrenheit 3 hours after blood transfusion. There is no hypertension, rigor, or breathlessness. What are the possibilities? So, Rishi madam, you can ask the audience to put up their answer between 1, 2, 3, 4. If
you may just answer it in the chat box.
So I request all of you to just put up an answer for the sake of understanding. AHTR is acute hemolytic transfusion reaction. DHTR is delayed hemolytic transfusion reaction. FN3 is febrile non-hemolytic transfusion reaction. 4 is transfusion associated lung injury.
There are mixed answers till now.
Okay, great. So for the sake of time, we'll answer maybe some queries at the end of the day, end of the lecture. So this is something called febrile non-hemolytic transfusion reaction. So which is very typical. There occurs rise in patient temperature of more than 1 degree centigrade. Onset during or within 3 to 4 hours following transfusion. The key here is that it doesn't happen immediately after transfusion. It happens roughly after 3 hours of transfusion. So it takes its own time. Reactions are usually induced by cytokines, mostly in patients with multiply transfused patients, like a lot of transfusion he has received in last months or years, and multiparous women were more exposed to multiple childbirths. Occurs with approximately 1% of PRBC transfusion, but more importantly, more common with platelet transfusion. There are three types of febrile non-hemolytic transfusion reaction: mild, moderate, severe. Mild is temperature rise of at least 1 degree centigrade, but less than 1.5. And there's no chills, rigor, respiratory distress, or no hemodynamic instability. Moderate is unexplained temperature rise for at least more than 1 degree, but little bit more severe than the milder variety. Severe is temperature rise more than 2 degrees centigrade with some chills and rigor. So broadly, there are three types of reaction. And treatment, as there is a reaction, you have to stop transfusion for a while. Most important thing into transfusion is that whenever, my dear sisters, whenever you're encountering it, immediately stop the transfusion, check the level and recipient identity. So first of all, we have to negate the manual error thing. We have to cross check whether the cross matching has been done properly, whether we have checked the cross matching properly, whether we are giving the right blood to the right patient or not. So if you have checked the label and recipient identity is perfect, it has been perfectly cross matched, then we might restart the transfusion by slowing the transfusion. So sometimes a rapid transfusion can cause this, so let us slow the transfusion and wait for it. And temperature can be negated by giving a paracetamol 1 gram per hour, or if required, IV. Steroids are never indicated in this minor reactions. Coming to question number 2, a 56-year-old female develops severe rigor with hypotension within few minutes of starting blood transfusion. What is the immediate action? So, Reshi madam, just whether we can take up these questions. Anybody's answering?
Yeah, I'll see the chat box.
Yeah.
So you'll take up the answers at the end, Dr. Pragya?
We'll take up the answers. Okay. So interestingly, a female develop severe rigor with hypotension. That's a key within few minutes. Within minutes, let us say 1 or 2 minutes after just starting blood transfusion. So something we call it as acute hemolytic transfusion reaction. This is the most dreaded reaction. We are all afraid of this reaction. We have to be very, very careful about that. It occurs when incompatible RBCs are transfused to the recipient who has preformed antibodies, usually ABO incompatibility. Antibodies activate the complement system, causing severe intravascular hemolysis. And it occurs within minutes of starting transfusion. Like immediately you start blood transfusion, immediately within 2 to 3 minutes, patient develops severe rigor, severe chills, blood pressure drop. And the hemolytic reaction can occur with as little as 1 to 2 cc of RBC. Just you start the ability, just after 1 to 2 cc of blood going inside the patient's body, recipient's body, it can happen. Common problem is labeling error, cross matching problem, and it is the reaction which can be fatal, can cause death, have caused a lot of death if not noticed, if not adequately addressed at the right time. So key here is it occurs within minutes. Labeling error is the most common problem, can be fatal. These three things we all should remember, my dear nurses, myself, doctors, junior doctors. Within minutes something happening, and labeling error is, you have detected labeling error, so you have to be very, very careful. Signs and symptoms include fever, chills, rigor, nausea, vomiting, hypotension, tachycardia, flushed, dyspneic chest, abdominal and lower back pain, headache, hemoglobinemia, hemoglobinuria, oliguria, pallor, jaundice, bleeding. So dreaded one are pallor, jaundice, and bleeding due to DIC. Treatment: stop the transfusion immediately. Check the label and recipient immediately, identify whether there is error in cross matching right from the blood bank level or at our level, at the bedside level. Immediately replace the IV set and start normal saline. As I've told in the last slide, even 1 to 2 cc of blood can cause horribly dangerous reaction. So IV set might be containing some amount of RBC. When you're flushing normal saline, those RBC can enter and again restart the same reaction. So immediately remove the IV set, if possible venflon as well. Treat shock like you treat shock always. Maintain the blood pressure, the IV saline, vasopressor. Investigate possible DIC and treat if clinical significant bleeding is there. So if there is a bleeding, there's a hemolysis, you need to replace blood. You need to find out DIC, there is some platelet decrease, replace it, some clotting factor decrease, replace it. Yes, if after managing there is a drop in urine output, it's not happening, furosemide and mannitol can be considered. Hydrocortisone is the drug which can be considered in this scenario. And you should investigate like RFT, liver function test, renal function test, LDH, Coombs test, haptoglobin, all to find out whether there is hemolysis or not. And send a hemovigilance notification blood bank that has been cross error in mismatch. So what we need to understand, my dear sisters, is that we have to be very, very careful about this reaction. We have to remove the IV set and if possible, venflon immediately, start IV fluid immediately, give vasopressor if required, give steroid if required, give diuretics or mannitol if unit is not coming. There's another reaction called delayed hemolytic transfusion reaction. I'll go quickly through it because we do not encounter it more often in ICU. It occurs in patients previously sensitized with antigen due to transfusion or pregnancy. A fall in titer over time may make incompatibility undetectable. A subsequent transfusion may recall the antibody causing hemolysis followed by falling hematocrit 5 to 10 days earlier. So somebody received a blood 5 to 10 days earlier and there occurs after 10 days there occurs a fall in hemoglobin. So hematocrit will continue to fall until all the transfused RBCs. So it's a very minuscule presence of antibody which starts to reactivate after 10 days and start destroying your recipient's PRBC. Onset usually, donors PRBC. Onset usually 1 to 7 days, may be prolonged up to 28 days, worsening anemia and jaundice from destruction of RBC, often asymptomatic but rarely splenomegaly hemoglobin can happen. So renal impairment may occur in severe cases, but we do not encounter that quite often in our ICU scenario. We encounter that more in OPD scenario. So we have to investigate like CBC, direct Coombs test to find out hemolysis, blood group antibody screening, haptoglobin concentration falls when hemolysis occurs. Coming to the next, 22-year-old female developing urticarial rashes all over the body 1 hour after transfusion possibility. So choice A is acute hemolytic transfusion reaction, B is delayed hemolytic transfusion reaction, C is allergic reaction, D is transfusion associated lung injury. So I'll just pause for 30 seconds for all of you to answer. Then we can, due to shortage of time, we'll go to the next slide. So here is that urticarial rashes all over the body 1 hour after transfusion. That is the key over here.
There's a common answer. All of them they are answering C.
Great, fantastic. So allergic transfusion reactions, frequency is 1:100 to 1:500. So there are 3 types of reaction: minor or little bit severe. We'll talk about minor first. It is more common with plasma and platelet components rather than PRBC. Flushed skin, rashes, urticaria we see, angioedema, periorbital itch, erythema, conjunctival edema, edema of the lips, tongue and uvula. These things we usually see. Management is we are slowing the transfusion, check label and recipient sanity, antihistaminics like loratadine, cetirizine if symptoms are troublesome. If symptoms are mild and transient, transfusion may resume. Continue transfusion at a slow rate with increasing monitoring, BPT per 15-30 minutes, and send a hemophilian notification. So what we need to understand here is that a small antihistaminic dose can solve the issue here, and we can resume the transfusion reaction. But there are certain moderate reaction which onset usually within first 50 to 100 ml infused blood within 4 hours. Symptoms a little bit more in terms of cough, hypotension, tachycardia, dyspnea, and oxygen desaturation, chills, rigor, loin pain, anxiety. In this scenario, we might have to stop transfusion, replace the IV set, give saline, monitor closely, and depending on the reaction, decide whether we need to give or not. And anti-allergy remains the first line of treatment over here. Severe one is called anaphylactic reaction. Frequency is 1 in 20,000 to 15,000. It is very rapid in onset. May be due to an antibody in the recipients reacting with plasma protein and blood component. IgA deficient individuals are prone for this type of reactions. So if we can check IgA for everybody who's getting blood, then it would have solved it, but it's practically difficult. It causes a lot of life-threatening reaction in terms of hypotension, shock, tachycardia, widespread urticaria, skin flushing, itching, wheezing, stridors, change in voice. It's a very severe type of reaction, needs emergency, needs real critical care, follow-up and attention. We have to stop the transfusion in management. Sometimes we have to give adrenaline as per the dose recommended. You have to replace the IV set, give lot of crystalloids or colloids to keep the BP up. Hydrocortisone should be considered over here along with anti-allergic like H1 antihistaminics, loratadine or cetirizine. Ranitidine may be added for severe reaction. Patient may need non-invasive or invasive ventilator support. Chest X-ray is a must to find out what's happening. Fourth one is the 4 hours after blood transfusion, a patient develops a drop in saturation and required increase in oxygen requirement. What should the diagnosis? The choice remains same: acute hemolytic transfusion reaction, delayed hemolytic transfusion reaction, transfusion associated lung injury, transfusion associated cardiac overload. Here key is that there is not much of reaction here. There is no urticaria, no hypotension, no rigor. There is only drop in saturation, patient becoming suddenly little bit dyspneic and a drop in saturation. Okay, so I'll just pause for 15 seconds for you people to answer.
There's a tie between C and D, Raleigh and Taco. So we'll
Yeah, exactly. But get to know that. Yeah, transfusion associated lung injury. That is a pretty common discussion in all critical care scenario. Whenever you encounter a bad lungs after a blood transfusion, it onset is within 6 hours of transfusion of plasma. So more importantly, plasma containing cellular components usually cause a complex group of disorder which is indistinguishable from ARDS. So when somebody with ARDS, next day after blood transfusion, if lungs worsens, you do not know whether it is due to transfusion associated lung injury or it's a worsening of ARDS. So one recognized mechanism involves a donor antibody reacting with recipient's neutrophil or HLA antigens causing cell activation that results in acute severe microvascular lung injury. But what we need to know how to diagnose onset of severe dyspnea, cyanosis, hypoxia proceeding to respiratory failure or bilateral infiltrate chest X-ray within 6 hours of transfusion. And absence of left atrial hypertension like J may not be raised. It has to be distinguished one cardiovascular overload that is commonly the another DD of it is TACO and other causes of ALI and ARDS. Testing donor plasma for anti-HLA antibody can support the diagnosis, but that is plausible, not always plausible. Common risk factors are shock, multiparous women, chronic alcohol use, liver transplant patients, somebody requiring a high mechanical ventilation support of 30 centimeter support, somebody requiring positive fluid balance. If somebody is having all those factors, they are more likely to person going for transfusion associated lung injury. It is associated with high morbidity and majority of the patients require ventilator support, at least non-invasive ventilator support. Lung injury is generally transient and with oxygen levels returning to pre-transfusion level within 48 to 96 hours and chest X-ray returning to normal within 96 hours. Some patients are slow to recover and may remain hypoxic with persistent pulmonary infiltrates for several days, or the pulmonary functions eventually returns to baseline without apparent sequelae. And there's no role of diuretics. The mortality rate of trial is reported as high as 20% in general population. There is an old record. I think it has reduced significantly with good critical care. Next differential diagnosis, transfusion associated circulatory overload. It's rapid onset after infusion of volume of fluid that is clinically significant for the affected recipient. Usually it happens in premature newborn if you give blood a little bit rapidly. Elderly patient with impaired cardiovascular function, like somebody with the ejection fraction of 30%, suddenly you are given 100 ml blood, rapid push due to sudden unwanted opening or unwarranted opening of the IV set, it causes TACO. Somebody with renal impairment like chronic kidney disease, somebody with infusion of blood given too rapid for the recipient. Volume infusion is too great, like somebody we have planned a total fluid intake of 1 liter, already 900 has been given, after that you plan to give a blood, then that's a problem. And acute heart failure. How to prevent it? Slow infusion rate, low volume of transfusion. So keep packed cell, don't give whole blood. If whenever you are giving, try to little bit slow, give it over a span of 3 to 4 hours. Clinical feature include increase in blood pressure, rapid bounding pulse, tachypnea, dyspnea with ping for the sputum, oxygen desaturation, consistent pulmonary edema, bilateral crepitations, raised GFP and CP. Acute X-ray chest will show worsening pulmonary edema, and ultrasound shows multiple B lines. Management: stop transfusion, oxygen. Here diuretics is indicated because it is pure fluid overload. If you are giving furosemide, some amount of blood will get out through urine, patient will start feeling better. Non-invasive ventilation may require invasive ventilation, and a raised proBNP can also help in this scenario. Coming down to other common bacterial sepsis that we encounter in blood transfusion, it is more common with platelet transfusion. If it comes to platelet, usually gram-positive organism comes to platelets. If it is through RBCs, Yersinia, Enterobacter, mostly gram-negative. Somebody developing rigor, chills, fever following blood transfusion, we have to be very, very careful. Think of somebody happening, some not adequate storage of the blood, not adequate transportation of the blood. So that's why blood product is growing some amount of bacteria, which after transfusion is entering the recipient's blood and causing this sort of symptom. May cause shock within minutes of starting transfusion. Respiratory distress, wheezing, oxygen desaturation, loin pain, nausea, and treatment is nothing but you have to give right antibiotic and very timely. Otherwise, patient may get a lot of harm from it. Hypothermia, progressive onset during rapid infusion of large volume of cold fluid. Like somebody with a severely bleeding patient, we give multiple transfusion and we have not adequately warmed the patient, warmed the blood products before giving it, can land in hypothermia. Usually happens in children. So signs and symptoms are very simple. Reduced temperature may be associated with cardiac rhythm. Arrhythmia is the most common thing we see. Impaired platelet functions. Management is limit the heat loss from recipient. Monitor BP, temperature, pulse. If further blood components required, infuse through a warmer. Warmer, we give blood warmer a lot of time. Not available in all ICUs, but if you have a warmer, then definitely it helps prevent this complication. So if you want to put it all together, so category 1, category 2, category 3, we divide all the reactions. Mild reaction, we'll have some urticaria and itching after giving blood transfusion within 1 or 2 hours. Patient will a lot of itching, periorbital itching, urticaria, heaves, a lot of rashes. So those will be mostly cutaneous within minutes of commencing. So there you have to stop the transfusion. Definitely start give IVIL that we give, IVIL or chlorpheniramine. And there we can continue the transfusion at the normal rate if there is no progression of symptom up to 30 minutes. So check for 30 minutes. If there is no progression of infusion, sit tight, start the transfusion with good vigilance. So if there is no clinical improvement within 30 minutes, the patient goes to category 2 reaction, where it's a moderate allergic reaction. Even anaphylactic reaction comes into this category. This is a little bit more symptomatic in terms of anxiety, palpitation, headache, severe pruritus, dyspnea, fever, urticaria, rigor, tachycardia, and flushing. There you have to stop the transfusion and most importantly replace the infusion set, keep the IV open with normal saline. Antihistaminics is the key everywhere. Antipyretic, IV corticosteroid and bronchodilators if there is severe anaphylactic feature causing severe bronchospasm or stridor. And do the tests to find out whether it's acute hemorrhagic transfusion reaction or the anaphylactic reaction. If there is clinical improvement within 30 minutes, you can restart the transfusion with good vigilance. Category 3 is life-threatening one. The most common causes are acute intravascular hemorrhages, like what is acute hemorrhagic transfusion reaction, bacterial contamination and septic shock, fluid overload, anaphylactic shock, and transfusion-associated lung injury. Symptoms are anxiety, chest pain, respiratory distress, shortness of breath, low and back pain, headache, dyspnea, rigor, fever, restlessness, shock, tachycardia, hemoglobinuria, and some features of DIC in terms of petechiae, red urine, bleeding somewhere, clotting somewhere. These are the factors. It's very, very dangerous. You have to stop the transfusion, check the label and recipient identity, replace the infusion set, keep IV line open with normal saline, vasopressors, maintain airway, give high flow oxygen, give adrenaline in this scenario, IV corticosteroids and bronchodilators if there is bronchospasm and stridor, but steroid is the main key over here. Diuretics if urine output is not happening within 1 or 2 hours. Antihistaminics can be added as well. I think I'll stop over here. Rishi madam, if you find out if some questions in the query box, we are all welcome to ask some questions. We can go back to the question scenario if you want. Rishi madam, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Pragyan. A very, very important topic as per our day-to-day practice is concerned, and a well-covered topic, Dr. Pragyan. Kudos to you. You have covered almost all the aspects of transfusion, the different complications, the different complications we encounter during practicing blood transfusion practicing, and how it has to be treated. So from the audience, if there are any queries, you may please unmute or you speak, or you may even text.
The chat box, I'll ask in the chat box. Just see the chat box. There is any question, I can ask that.
So if we discuss the questions,
yeah,
then I
fair
think
enough.
that it would be easier.
Okay, fine. So coming out of question number 1. So female with the GI bleed, the commonest indication we give blood in an ICU. So after 3 hours, patient developing rise in temperature, but most importantly, what I have mentioned in the second line, there is no hypertension, no rigor, no breathless, no breathing difficulty. So here we are encountering only rise in temperature of roughly 2 degrees Fahrenheit following of 3 hours of blood transfusion. So commonest is febrile non-hemolytic transfusion reaction. This is the commonest reaction we encounter in after blood transfusion in ICU or ward as well. Here only sitting tight, having a close watch, giving antibiotic solves the issue. I think all of you are clear. on the question note is the easiest thing because there is no other reaction other than temperature rise. So only temperature rise, it's a febrile, and non-hemolytic hemolysis always it causes more difficulty for the patient. This non-hemolytic is called a febrile non-hemolytic transfusion reaction.
So the answer
Coming,
here is C.
febrile non-hemolytic transfusion reaction.
Yeah.
Coming to question number 2, if somebody after few minutes of starting the blood transfusion developing severe rigor and hypertension. Key here is hypertension and rigor. Whenever there is a hypertension after even after getting any drug, any blood transfusion, it always mandates serious attention to the patient. There is something serious happening over here. So this is actually acute hemolytic transfusion reaction, which, as I have already told, it happens within few minutes. Even 1 to 2 cc of RBC can cause it. Why this happens? Because of the recipient's serum contains antibody against the donor RBCs, and immediately RBC enters the recipient's blood, it causes severe hemolysis, and hemolysis causes a cascade of reaction which causes severe rigor, chill, hypertension. So what we need to do, as I've told, we have to change the IV set, immediately start IV fluid to keep the BP up. If you are unable to maintain the BP up, you have to start noradrenaline. If after starting noradrenaline fluid, etc., we are unable to pass out urine, we have to start diuretics. Hydrocortisone is the key if all three cannot solve. So answer here is all of the above. Of course, the question is a little bit tricky. It is asking immediate action because IV fluid NORAD is one of the immediate. Even hydrocort can also be considered as immediate action. So answer here is all of the above. Within a span of 30 minutes, you have to take care of all the factors here. Maintaining blood pressure by IV fluid and vasopressor, maintaining urine output with diuretics, and if there's a severe reaction and rigor, we have to give hydrocortisone as well. So this is called acute hemolytic transfusion reaction.
Dr. Pragyan, there's a question in the chat box. I think it's better we answer those.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Rather than
how about medicating the patient with phenyramine and hydrocortisone with a history of mild reaction to blood products?
Excellent question. I think this gentleman should be given a trophy for asking this question. Definitely, as medical science have developed, 10 years back, there are some recommendations we should be pre-medicating the patients with injection like Avil and hydrocortisone before starting blood transfusion. But now we are not at all doing it. But your question is very pertinent. Somebody who has developed a reaction like febrile non-hemolytic, some sort of reaction before in previous blood transfusion, there is no harm in giving an anti-allergy before starting it. Also, although there is no gross recommendation regarding this, but it is plausible clinical common sense that if somebody had a reaction before and patient is definitely first one is to avoid blood transfusion next time, but definitely starting an anti-allergy before giving is definitely mandated over here.
I would just like to add, so a history taking, a proper history taking is very important.
Correct.
What was the blood reaction due to? If we see the blood reaction was maybe a contamination, or maybe if the patient is having a blood reaction due to some intrinsic allergic reactions, as Dr. Pragyan had mentioned, then yes, of course, if we might need to pre-medicate the patient. Right, Dr. Pragyan?
Yeah, right. Definitely.
Okay, there's another question in the chat box. If patient with severe trauma with hemorrhagic shock and continuous high-grade fever, not responding to antipyretics and cold sponging, can blood transfusion be given?
Sorry, ask the question again. Hello?
Patient with severe trauma with shock, hemorrhagic shock, and the patient is having continuous high-grade fever, which is not responding to antipyretics and cold sponging.
Yeah.
So can blood transfusion be given in this case scenario?
Yes.
Of course, yes, I think.
Yes, definitely. So we have to understand the point over here. Yeah. Whenever there is a high-grade fever, we are not giving blood transfusion at the time because if there is some raise in temperature, some reaction after BT, where maybe we are unable to detect. That is the key over here. But trauma patient due to some other causes, lot of causes like there's a brain trauma, if there's abdominal injury, there will be some rise in temperature which won't respond to any antipyretic. And patients' recurrent blood is much more important over here than managing the reaction. So definitely somebody with a trauma with a rise in temperature, definitely blood transfusion should be given without a second thought.
We should be very clear that why do we avoid blood transfusion in fever? As Dr. Pragyan had mentioned at the starting, we have to be sure that that fever is not caused by the blood transfusion. If we know the cause of fever in that patient, if it may be due to blood in the ventricles or the trauma, there is some blood because of the central cause of fever. Then, and where the patient is in shock, needing blood, so definitely we need to transfuse the patient blood in spite of having fever. You understand? So that
Yes.
should not be mixed up here. Okay, then I think we should take up the next question. Question 2 we have discussed.
Yeah. So
So
coming to question number
3.
three. Three is so somebody developing arterial rash, mostly cutaneous reactions all over the body 1 hour after transfusion. So all of you people have answered very nicely.
Answer,
Allergic
yeah,
reaction.
they have all
Yeah, yeah.
answered allergic reaction.
So
Very
I think this is very clear. All of you know that somebody with the arterial rash, it's typical allergy reaction which we need to address properly. I think there is no doubt. Rather, I'll go to question number 4, which is little bit tricky. So
yeah.
4 hours after blood transfusion, a patient develops a drop in saturation. So there is no rigor here, no hypertension here, only oxygen drop, breathing difficulty, and drop in saturation. Here we have 4 choices, out of which, as Dr. Reshu told, choice number C, TRALI, transfusion associated lung injury, and transfusion associated circulatory overload are 2 differential diagnoses over here. We need to distinguish between 2. So transfusion associated circulatory overload is typical, happens in somebody with a acute and chronic renal failure, somebody with a bad ejection fraction, heart function very bad, somebody with already lot of positive balance, and somebody who settles with the diuretics. That's the key to distinguish between both. If you give a diuretic class 6 or somebody put on NIV, transfusion associated cardiac overload usually settles. It is nothing but simply a little bit more amount of intravascular volume in a patient who is already having lot of fluid overload. But transfusion associated lung injury is typical an immune reaction which happens only in the lungs. Lungs worsens like anything without any features of fluid overload. That is the key pathogenesis between both. How to distinguish between 2 is very key important for you. Distinguishing is very simple. If patient doesn't have any features of fluid overload like raised in JVP and edema, somebody having a very good heart function, somebody not having very severe renal failure, it is transfusion associated lung injury. And you put somebody a small dose of diuretics, you put connect him on a non-invasive ventilator, the transfusion associated circulatory overload improves immediately. Distinguishing, if you do an NT-proBNP, that's marker of congestive cardiac failure, you will see very high NT-proBNP in transfusion associated cardiac overload. But key over here is give oxygen support, give non-invasive ventilator, wait for some time, not settling, you can give a trial of diuretics. That is, I think that will be more good, more than good for our nursing staff.
So maybe here, like it's Trali and TACO, almost like as we distinguish between ARDS and pulmonary edema. So these are the same features. To distinguish both, we need to do certain investigations then from the history, what is the background history, but the treatment, at least that immediate treatment is the same. We need to correct the oxygenation by providing him or her the oxygen support, NIV may be needed, and then we distinguish between. Also, I think, Dr. Pragyan, the timing would be a very important factor,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
Trali will occur within 6 hours,
yeah. And
as
TACO
clearly.
can happen as per the blood. If it can happen within 15 minutes, if you give suddenly 100 to 200 ml of blood.
Blood.
Even if slow transfusion, it usually happens within 1 to 2 hours because it doesn't wait till 4 hours.
Exactly. So
I
there's one
think,
question in the chat
yeah,
box.
yeah.
Hypocalcemia and metabolic acidosis following blood transfusion. Do you recommend regular post-transfusion correction?
Hypocalcemia and metabolic acidosis.
Metabolic acidosis.
No, so what we are doing here, we are mixing around 350 ml of blood with 5 liter of our body. Like our body contains roughly 5 liter of intravascular volume. We are mixing 250 ml. So definitely after if there is a reaction, you can check on ABG to find out how bad is the acidosis. So these things come into consideration when you are giving multiple blood transfer. Like somebody with a trauma requiring huge amount of blood. Normally 1 or 2 transfusion that we usually do one transfusion doesn't change much of your acidosis and calcium unless you have already a low calcium level over there. Yes, your point is pertinent if you are considering the patients with multiple blood transfusion, like more than 5 or 6 transfusion for any sick patients, traumatic patient. There you can think of correcting them.
Is this life-threatening metabolic acidosis? Yes, we need to correct. So
Yeah,
it's basically seen, as Dr. Pragyan have said, is basically seen in massive transfusion when we are transfusing more than 4 to 5 units of blood or blood product. Any other? We have one more question, I think, after that. So that's it from your presentation.
Yeah. No.
That,
That's it. That's nothing else.
yeah.
I think. Is there any other question in the chat box?
So any other questions from the audience? It's a very, as we have already seen, it's a very, very important topic, and we encounter this in everyday practice. ICU critically ill patients, we need to transfuse blood or blood cells in any form, and encountering these complications is quite common. But it's very, very important to distinguish, to diagnose what is the cause, and to treat it accordingly.
Correct. Very nicely said, madam. Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah. So this is available in the. I think Neil will share. This is available, or I'll share the PowerPoint presentation also. If anybody is interested, can see it. It will be available in the Facebook for a while, I think.
Sir, actually, this is currently live on Facebook, and
Yeah.
in a few weeks, in the next week, it will be also live on. Sorry, it will also be put on a YouTube channel.
Yeah. Excellent. I think
Which,
it is
so
on.
there's one last question, I think.
Yeah, sure.
Which blood products are given with filter set and which are not given with filter set?
Usually whole blood is given through filter set because whole blood contains plasma, other platelet component, which are more deleterious for reaction testing. So whenever you're transfusing whole blood, preferably go through a filter. Rishi madam, you can correct me if
Yes.
anything I missed.
So only like whole blood. So nowadays, if we are giving basically the recommendation is we give blood components. We do not give whole blood so much. So when we are giving blood components, we do not need the filter. We need the filter only when we are transfusing whole blood to avoid those reactions to the whole blood, to filter out the leukocytes and the platelets and the plasma.
Yeah, correct, madam, correct. So only in whole blood scenario we'll have to give filter, others not.
So I think if there are no other questions, so Neil, can we sum up and we?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you so much, Dr. Pragyan. It's always wonderful to hear you and listen to your presentations. You have excellent, and this presentation is almost a book on transfusion. So I request all of you to quite follow it. And during your exams, just before the exam, it will be just a very quick recap of the topic.